Welcome to the fifth session of Baltimore Data Week. It's day 2, session number 5. Very excited to see you all. Just a reminder, we are in what's called a meeting format, not a webinar format. And so this is a little more casual. You can see who the other participants are. And so just to get set up, people might be coming in and out of this session. It's meant to be very interactive after we do a little bit of presentation. If you can go under participants and rename yourself and make sure that you show people who you are, your affiliation, your pronouns, your organization, your neighborhood, your pet's name, whatever you want to say so that we all know who each other is. This will be a relatively interactive session. And you have a poll that you can tell us who you are, what sector of the world you're coming from. And we will get started in just a second as we get people in the door. And for those of you who I don't know personally, my name is Seema Iyer, and I oversee the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance at the University of Baltimore. And I am just going to kick off the session and turn it over to Kristen and Cheryl, who will tell you much more about this overall project and a brand new tool that we're actually launching with you today. So this is hot off the digital presses, I guess we should call it, and excited to launch it with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Murray, and all of the bios are in the chat. They're all online, and we'll be popping them in the chat so you get to know much more about Kristen as we go on. And thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you so much, Seema. And I also want to welcome everyone for joining. And I think right now I just will try to share my screen. Is that possible right now? There, now I think it is. Okay, so bear with me. I just have a short, there we go. Hopefully everyone can see that okay?
Yes.
So I just have a short, brief overview about what this data workshop is about and what the context of this study that this database fits into. So I would say now it was November of 2020, we were all awarded this grant through Johns Hopkins called the SciBar grant. And the grant that we have was really looking at this notion of how can greening improve adolescent health disparities in Baltimore City. So a little background behind this. I had been doing a lot of research about this, especially with adults. And there was this, a lot of evidence was growing that showed that people that lived near vacant lots and abandoned buildings exhibited poor health, particular mental health, high rates of violence. But there was growing new evidence that suggested if these vacant lots were greened and restored, they really improved the health of residents that live nearby. But most of this research was really focused on adults. And I tried searching for studies that were done among adolescents, and they were far and fewer between. And this was kind of surprising to me because I had done just some research just looking at neighborhoods and learned that adolescents spend far more time in the neighborhoods compared to adults, and that when they looked at the differences between perceptions of their neighborhood comparing adults versus adolescents, adolescents had a much different perception about their neighborhoods compared to adults. So I thought, there's something here. And if we look at the situation in Baltimore, Baltimore City has over 18,000 vacant lots and an additional 17,000 abandoned buildings. And there has been this movement now to green and restore these vacant lots. And a little bit ago, about 900 vacant lots have been greened to date, and this number is growing. But the restoration and the greening activities can take a variety of different forms. So some of this restoration activity involves mowing and trash pickup. Other types of activities include community gardens, then there's raised flower beds and tree planting, art murals, benches. So a variety of different types of greening activities. And so we thought, well, given the variety and given the lack of research that's really been done among adolescents, and particularly Baltimore, we thought this could be a good opportunity to really understand, as these restoration activities are underway, whether they can actually improve the health of adolescents. So with this SCIBOR award, which stands for Support for Creative, Integrative, Basic, and Applied Research, we have since relabeled it to Project Vital, and Vital stands for Vacant Lot Improvements to Transform Adolescent Lives. So that's our study logo right now. But the overall study goal is really to determine whether vacant lots restoration strategies can reduce health disparities among young people. And then if so, what types of activities work best for whom, and if we can capture some of those reasons behind that. So to get us there and meet that goal, we have a number of short-term objectives. And the first is really to build a shareable database among key characteristics of restored and unrestored vacant lots. Right now, we're in the process, and this is what this workshop is about building this database. It's currently very hard to look at this goal without this database. There's different types of organizations, they have different types of data. And so we are hoping that as part of this project, we can take all of that information and put it on a map that researchers, practitioners, policymakers can use for the future to really make some decisions about how best to utilize these vacant lots. So using this database as a starting point, what we would like to do then is conduct a mixed method longitudinal study to look at these variations in greening with regards to improving adolescent health. Within that, we want to embed a cost effectiveness study. So we're trying to also then, once we have these greening activities on the map, to also collect the costs associated with those greening activities to determine whether there is some type of cost effectiveness associated with those in terms of reducing violence, reducing mental health, and food insecurity. Once we capture all this information, then we hope to develop and disseminate a blueprint for how we can reduce adolescent health disparities through vacant lot restoration activities. And if so, how we can use those best practices for other cities that have a high percentage of vacant lots. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's a 4-year study, and right now we're just in the beginning, and particularly want to use this time to really focus on this database. One of the best things about this study is the team. And so not only do I have these amazing folks working with me at BINIA, but I have some folks on this call that hopefully they'll introduce themselves at some point. U.S. Forest Service, USDA Forest Service, I should say. We just learned that in a recent meeting. We should call them that. We've got researchers from different departments at Hopkins, from the University of Maryland. We've got state and local agencies and a number of community-based organizations. Like I said, a number are on this call. So we've got Katie Lauder from Baltimore Green Space, Parks and People Foundation, and a number of others. And so we hope that we use this time, if some of you are involved in greening and this study is sounding interesting to you, come on board. We'd love to have you. One of the things that I'm trying to also do with this study is to avoid duplication of efforts. So if we could get all of us together and share our collective knowledge, I'm hoping that'll prevent future small scale studies that basically do the same thing, which typically happens a lot here in Baltimore. So again, the focus for today is really this database. The database is going to be developed, is being developed right now by our BINIA team. And it's Cheryl Knott is going to take over from me right after I'm done, and she'll walk you through kind of where we are right now. The biggest need that we have right now is making sure that we have the greening data. So for those of you on this call that are involved in greening and have data, that is what we need. Because we hope then when it's done, this is going to be a very user-friendly platform where researchers, again, can use this to see kind of where these greening activities are located, what are the organizations, what's the type of greening, what's the level of maintenance, among others. We want to make sure that we're capturing those important elements that'll make decision-making and research much more applicable. So just to give you a little bit more about this study, so the primary outcomes that we're going to be looking at is exposure to crime and violence, mental health, and we have both positive and negative outcomes there, as well as food insecurity. So we have developed right now a draft of this survey, and we hope to collect data among approximately 750 adolescents between the ages of 14 and 19. We want to do this survey 3 times over the course of a 10-week growing season. So we'll likely do it before the greening season, during the greening season, and then we'll wait a little bit to see how sustained those changes are after. We're going to do the recruitment again based on this database. So they'll be spatially confined to areas with lot density that have these greening types of activities done. And also we need adolescents. So we need high adolescent population. So we're thinking at least 25% of the households that surround that area with adolescents. In addition to the survey, we want to conduct observations of the neighborhood and lot environments, and we'd like to include young people. I should say that we do have a youth advisory board, and they've been amazing in terms of helping us think through some of these design issues, and they've already helped us with the survey. And we'd like to include them as well as graduate students to help us conduct these lot assessments. And that's really going to be important for measuring quality. So we will have this database and we'll have things on the map, but what it looks like, that's another story. So we're going to have to really go to the lots and see what they look like in terms of maintenance to be able to help us develop a quality score. And then in addition, we want to do in-depth interviews. And what we're hoping for is based on the quality of these lot assessments to interview those that live next to high quality restored lots, those that maybe haven't been maintained, and to gather their perceptions about what the impact of these restored lots have been on their health. When we were developing the proposal for this study, we got together and we developed a theory of change. And I'm not going to go through this as in detail, but just to show you that, when we were thinking about this, we thought about the different levels of greening and types of greening, and that's what's in the central part of this. And then we thought about these mechanisms of change really operate on the individual level, so the adolescent themselves, but also the interpersonal, the community, the neighborhood, and then finally the environmental, the big environmental factors. And we want to capture all of that as part of this study. So we hope at the end then that we'll have some high impact. I think in and of itself, this database is going to be able to do that to really move the field ahead. But we know that with increased urbanization, there's going to be mounting pressure to limit green space. And this is not only true in Baltimore, but also in other urban areas. And so we hope to show that what is the importance of this green space for health and health equity. And we really think that the GIS comprehensive database, like I said, is going to be a resource for not only decision making among city leaders here, but also for those of us that are in the research and greening folks themselves to be able to make better decisions about how to spend money and costs related to greening, but then to think about more in terms of health. How does this greening and influence the health of adolescents? Are there specific subgroups that may be more influenced than others? That's what we want to try to look at. And I think one of the most important things, as well as I mentioned, we have a youth advisory board, but really this is one of the first studies on greening that's going to really incorporate the voices of young people. And we hope that that'll further move the field, especially if we do find that greening does influence health. We want to have young people, their perceptions, their insights be at the center of that to help us move the field even further. So I think that is all I have. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll just wait for any questions before I pass it over to Cheryl, who's going to talk again more about what this database looks like right now.
Yeah, so as we were mentioning at the top of this session, please feel free to drop any questions that you might have into the chat box. We do have nearly 40 folks in here, so we are hoping that we'll have lots of opportunities for conversations about this. I do see that there is a question in the chat right now from Chris Kingsley. We're starting with data from the city, list of vacant lots, lots with adoption agreements from the city, DHCD. So we will talk about that right as we're getting into my portion of our presentation today. Then we have another question. Is there funding for residents to improve vacant lots and adopted lots? There's one in Park Circle where they want to put in space for grilling and some park benches. So go ahead.
If you want, yeah, I mean, the honest answer is no. We have the funding for this project that I just laid out, but we hope that the findings are going to be able to help at least with making decisions about what's the right way to restore a lot. So that will help with funding decisions early on or soon after, we hope.
Mhm. And I'd also like to mention that in addition to both Kristen and myself, we have a few other folks that are some of the partners on this project. So we have some folks that are from the city as well as some community-based organizations. So I encourage them. Don't want you to put you guys on the spot, but as we're going through, and if you have questions that you would be able to answer, please feel free to hop in and help us keep this workshop moving along, because this is certainly a pretty large and robust project, and we have a lot of moving pieces in developing this data set and getting it on board so that folks can actually start using the data, advocating for development in their neighborhood, and just thinking through greening initiatives. So I'm going to just share something really quickly in the chat before I start screen sharing. So that right there is the link to a website that we have started to put together, share a little bit of information about the Project Vital initiative. So this is where you can find a lot of that information that Kristen was covering about the purpose of the project, some of the components that you mentioned, such as the Youth Advisory Board, and a lot of the contact information.
Cheryl, you went mute for us.
Sorry, that was strange. So yes, that was very odd. So as I was saying, so on this website, I just dropped it into the chat. This is where you can find that more information about this project, these pieces that Kristen was talking about, the Youth Advisory Board. You can see contact information for folks that are on the project team and some of the other resources. And so the thing that I'm going to be focusing in specifically for this workshop is going to be a map and dashboard that the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance put together to help disseminate this growing database of information about greened lots in Baltimore City. So let me share this quick PowerPoint here. So one of the things that we have been doing is pulling together existing data sets from known partners, folks that have data already about vacant lots, and in particular vacant lots that have some sort of greening activity on them. And so right now we have really robust data that is coming from Baltimore Green Space. We have data coming from the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future, and then both the Care a Lot and Adopt a Lot data sets coming from the city of Baltimore. And so we know that there are other partner organizations out there that have databases. And so we're really going to be looking forward to working with these organizations to take the data as they're creating it right now and thinking about how it can be integrated into this master database and how it can be usable for this project and usable to the public as well. So the things that we're really kind of emphasizing right now are listed here. So number one, location. So where is this lot located? And so in these databases and these data forms that we're getting, this could be either latitude, longitude coordinates, so a specific place. We could have a street address, 123 Main Street. We could have something like a unique block and lot. So this is a unique identifier for a parcel of land. So however the data is being collected, as long as it has one of those elements, it can be usable and integrated into the database. Additionally, some sort of date field. So is this an existing lot? Is this something that might be a year or two out of date? It's important for us to know the timeliness of some of these records. The purpose, so why does this site or this lot exist? And that feeds into the next part. How is it being used? So is this a site that has community building activities? Is it a site that has food being grown on it, for instance? The other thing that we're integrating is the organization. So where is this data coming from? How is it being fed into the database? So we know who was the original source of this information into the master database. Here's the big one, the level or the type of graining. So this is something that is a little bit more difficult for us to tease out and to develop into this database, but exactly what is happening at these lots. And so figuring out a way of kind of quantifying the work that's being done on the ground, that's something that we're looking to integrate. Funding source for any lot activities. And then lastly, the stewardship. And that refers both to who exactly, so what partner group is the steward of this particular lot, and then also just thinking through, in addition to who, but then how are they maintaining or managing this space. So those are like the really big core pieces that we're trying to integrate into this data set, but we're taking data as it is from our data partners. And so that often means receiving a lot of other pieces of information that could be useful. And so one of the big tasks of the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance and working with all of the partner organizations that are providing this information is to have a really clear understanding of what different fields are, what do they mean, and how can we all integrate it together. So for today, we're showing off a brand new website and tool, and I'm hoping that one of my BNIA colleagues can drop this link into the chat. So we've created an online interactive map and dashboard that takes the integrated data set that we've built out from those 4 different sources, and we're hoping to get lots more data from different partner organizations, as well as information that can be added literally to this map and this platform tonight even. And so the things that we're really going to be focusing in on are some of those fields that are in these databases. We'll be talking about how you can play around and look at what's in here, how you can add and contribute to the map, and then also helping think through what are some of the next steps of making this a really cohesive and easily understandable data set. So you can come into this map, and it is built off of the Esri ArcGIS online platform. So it is built both using a online interactive map, but then also using what's called operations dashboard. So we've integrated the map into this platform as well as the data. And it's really cool because you can play around with the map and it will update this panel that we have on the right-hand side that describes the different sites that are coming up. And on the left-hand side, we have ways of filtering the data so that you can get a more custom, narrowed down look and feel of some of these data points. And so when you come to this map, there's this little left-hand slider. So I happen to have it pinned, but it will kind of slide in, slide out, and allow you to, as I mentioned, customize this view of the data. And so that's just something that I wanted to mention in case folks are choosing to follow along on their own device. So I'm hoping that folks will be testing this out on their own. We would love to get some feedback, but if you'd rather just prefer to see me kind of drive the map and the website, that's what I'll be doing here. So as we can see here, the locations of the lots that we have from those existing 4 data sets are mapped out here. And so the interesting thing about this data set is that we do have a little bit of overlap. So there are some sites, some parcels that appear in multiple data sets. And so that's something that we're definitely mindful of is going forward, how will we start to integrate data from multiple different sources, into this one data set. But for now, we have things kind of broken out. So as you zoom in and play around with the map a little bit, you will see potentially some dots stacked literally on top of one another. And so you're able to see the data as we are literally working through it and building out this database of information. So let me talk a little bit about some of the things that you are seeing on this map. So in addition to this left-hand side where you can filter and the map that's in the center, on the right-hand side, this is here where you can see what I was kind of talking about. So we have over 5,800 records on the map. So these are rows in our database, got 5,800 of them. And then in terms of unique parcels, we have 2.7 thousand. So when I say a unique parcel, that is one block and lot. We're using that as our kind of basis for figuring out how many unique gardens or unique green lots that we might have. And so as we're playing around with this data and filtering through it a little bit, these numbers will interactively change. And this panel on the right-hand side will update as well. So I'm going to start filtering down some of the data so that we can start seeing the map update itself a little bit. So I'm going to come over here to the left-hand side, and I'm going to select organization source. And so what's great about all of these different filters, so you can select more than one. So if you wanted to, for instance, see data from Baltimore green space, you can click to select that, and it will automatically update the map and update these other pieces on the right-hand side. And then I will add in the Center for Livable Future. And so that then added a few additional records to the map. If I wanted to deselect, I can click on one of those names and it will deselect. Or let's say I wanted to select all of them. I have the option to select all, deselect all, and reset will unselect if you have a couple of those. So those are just some quick ways that you can kind of play around with these filters. So for Baltimore green space, I have that selected. So from Baltimore green space, we have a little over 800 records that are in their data set, and that translates to about 750 unique places that are on the map. So we have a couple duplications, but as we go through and look at all of the different fields that are in the database, we'll then recognize, well, a few of these might be duplicated because they're entering in at different years. So on this right-hand side, and I know this might be really hard to see, in the upper right-hand corner, there's this little icon that pops up that's a circle with these little arrows coming out of it. If you click on that, it will pull up a larger view of these filtered results. And so here's where you can scroll through and see all of the different fields that are in this database. And then you can see the different values that are coming through in your filtered results. And you can see things that are filled out, such as a site name. So for this one record that happened to be coming through with the Baltimore green space, we see the name is the Mount Street green space. We've got the block and lot. We've got an address. So it's located at 616 North Mount Street. And we've got a lot of other information about this particular lot of when it came into their data set, the type of lot. We can see that it was an adopt-a-lot, and then other fields that are in here. And so some of these are filled out, some of them are not. So what we've done from those 4 different data sets, we kept in all of the fields that were given to us. So some of these things are filled out from different sources, others we're missing that information. And so that's something that the database development team, we're going to be figuring out of how do we want to really integrate these? What are these really important fields that we're going to be continuing to maintain in this data set? So we have these little options here. So we've got little arrows to go back and forth. So you can click on the arrows and kind of go back and forth and see some of the different things that got filtered in. So I'm going to click back on that little icon in the upper right-hand corner. Let's close that out a little bit. So in addition to organization source, right now we have a few other ways of filtering the data down. So let's say we want to filter this down. So we want Baltimore green space, and we want to look at other types of sites. So right now we have it where you can search by different types of lots. So again, similar with the filtering, you can select some of these presets of clean and green. Is it a forest? Is it a garden? We have different uses of the lot. So these are all things that are provided, pardon me, in the database that was given to us. And you can do some keyword searches. So if you wanted to do a search for rain garden, you can start to see all of these different ways that rain gardens. So if I hit select all, it'll select those 4 that happen to have a rain garden in their description. Then you can also do condition of lots. So this is something that was coming from one of our data sources. And this has like a ranking of 1 to 3, of 3 being the best maintained. And so this is the type of thing that we don't have consistently across all of the different data points. So that's something that maybe we would want to work with the partners and decide, is this a type of a system that we would want to put into place for other sites to be able to have this ranking system. So we also have the year. So this again allows you to see how timely some of this data is. So if you wanted to filter by 1 or 2 multiple years, that's something that you can do. And then we also have zip code. So this is just one way that you can also filter the data by location. And so again, all of these different ways that you can filter the data, that's coming through the data fields that were already in the data set. And so there's other things that as we're pulling in data from all these different sources, that we can start adding additional fields if we want. So if we wanted to add in a label that has the BINIA, we use community statistical area to describe data in the city of Baltimore. If we wanted to add that to our finished database, that's something that we can easily do and then be able to provide that to folks. And so these are just a few of the ways that you can think about the data. And as you're filtering it, like I said, it will update the map and it will start updating some of these search results as well. And so if you have a curiosity about some of these points, we have a few different map tools that are on here. So these are just other ways of visualizing the data. So if you're really interested in like zooming in, we have ways of zooming in and out of the map, but it can sometimes be a little bit difficult of trying to figure out, okay, so we have some dots on the map, but what's actually there? So we have this little icon here. It's in the upper right-hand corner. If you click on that, it will pull in different what are called base maps. And so these are like that background reference. So you can pull in something like imagery and keep zooming in, zooming in, zooming in to see where exactly these points are corresponding on the ground. We have a couple other options here. So this one in the middle here that looks like pieces of paper stacked on top of one another. These are different data layers. And so where you have an eyeball, that is something that's visible. And so if you wanted to click on one of these data layers, it will make things appear or disappear. So you can do things like add in zip code boundaries. You can add in neighborhood boundaries for reference. And if you don't know a bit about the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance, what we do is we collect and disseminate community level statistics for Baltimore City. And so one of the things that we put out every year are robust maps that kind of show the spatial distribution of data across Baltimore's communities. And it can provide a lot of really important contextual information. So we provide on this map a couple of our community indicators that we put out every year. So in this case, I just turned on, and it will take a second to load. So this is the percentage of the population that is 5 to 17. So these are, this is concentrations of where youth are in Baltimore City that we've got on this map here. Let me turn off zip codes. So we have a lot going on this map. But so that's a way that you're able to kind of customize this data and then think through what do these points on the map really translate to. And then we have a couple other buttons. So we have a search box where you can put in an address and it will zoom into a particular location, and then you can pan around to see if there are any points nearby. And then lastly, we have this other little button here that will provide a map legend. And so this, again, is able to provide a little bit of information about what you're seeing on the map. And so, so right now we have neighborhoods turned on here. We've got that percentage of school-age population in Baltimore City. And then we've also got our data points. And so the big thing that we need to emphasize as well right here is that these green dots, these are dots of sites of these lots that are in this integrated database. So data that's coming in from these 4 different sources. But then we also have this other point here, submitted via form. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go back. I'm going to reset all these filters. Let's reset these, and then let's take a look. So the super cool thing about this map that we've built out is the ability that if you would like to add something to the map. So if you immediately know that there is a site in your community that you live or work in that needs to be added to the map, you can add it to the map right here from this dashboard. And so let me zoom out.
In the chat, we actually potentially have one example.
Fantastic.
And you can tell us how you would go about dealing with this. So Dee Farron is here from the Coppin State area and was saying that there might be some areas and plantings that have gone on around the campus near the bus stops, and wanted to know if they were already included on the map, and if not, maybe we could today add them to the map.
Awesome.
And the address is basically around the 2500 West North Avenue area, which is, I think, the Coppin address, but
sure. Well, fantastic. So I was just going to mention, so we can kind of see it down here. Sorry, I got excited and started typing in an address. So points that have been crowd submitted will be showing up on this map live as orange. And so that's a really cool visual way that we could start to see this distinguishment between things that might have come in through those 4 different sources, and then also things that are getting added to the map live. So when I say live, we'll have to refresh the page. But so let's go ahead and actually do this search for, I'm just going to do that search for the 2500 West North Avenue. And so I put in the address and it zooms me right in. So look at that. It actually takes me right on top of one of the buildings for Coppin State University. So I'm going to zoom out just a tiny little bit. So right now we don't have any of the filters turned on at this point. And I am going to just keep zooming out a little bit. But as far as I can see, we don't actually have any of those locations showing up on the map. So right here, we've got an opportunity to add those on. So if you have a handful of sites that you would like added to the map, so we wouldn't recommend this if you've got a pretty big, robust existing data set. So if you have a ton of sites and a ton of data, if you are already kind of collecting and maintaining a large database, this is not the best way of sending it and submitting it, but we have this option here of add a lot to the map and database, and it will take you to a web page that allows you to fill out what's called a geo form. And so this is a tool that is being used by us that will allow you to enter in information that then gets automatically updated and appended to that data layer that is shown on the map. So in this case, we can add in the site address. So I'm just going to briefly scroll down. So we've got site address, so location. So this is where we can describe where this lot is located, the types of lot, use. We have a text box where you can put in some notes, and then some contact information. So who would we get in contact with to get more information about this? And then lastly, I'm just going to keep scrolling down. Then we also have the option to literally zoom and put a point on the map and submit it. So I think that's pretty cool. Let me open up the chat here. So Seema, thank you for sending that link to some of our data partners. So Dee, if you have information about where these lots are actually located, this is something you can do. You can come right into this form here. Again, it's okay if you don't have all of these pieces of information. So if there isn't a specific well-known site name, it's okay to leave that blank, but we absolutely need some location information and then some information about like what's going on here. If it's trees planted, if there's a garden, if there's a little open space where residents can come together. This is where all that information can be put on here. And then if you are literally at the location, we have this option here to locate me, which will grab your physical location and put you directly onto the map itself. So this is just a fantastic and super easy way of adding in some of these lots to the map. And what happens is that this information gets appended to the data set that we already have, and we will get a little bit of information. So as you fill out this form, all of these things will be kind of pre-populated for us. And then on the back end, we'll be able to see when folks added in these details. So for instance, Baltimore Data Week, we're going to be wrapping up on Friday. So next Monday, if folks want to be adding in lots in the meantime, what we can do is put together a quick little blog post on Monday, because we'll be able to say, hey, we took a look at this data and we were able to see that we had, let's say, 50 submissions to this data set. And so with that information, we can validate it. And assuming it looks to be real, legitimate places that, it's not like me and my fake little data point in the middle of the harbor. So this is something I did put, test. I think I described it as like 1, 2, 3 fake street. So that's obviously not something that we would want to keep into the data set. But once it can be validated as a real location, that can be information that then becomes a part of this data set. And the thing that is so important for us to emphasize too is that just because there isn't a marker on the map right now doesn't mean that there's not a lot in the real world. It just means that we don't have it into our data set yet. So it's either not in any of these sources that we're getting from the city, from our community partners such as Baltimore Green Space. It means that we need to get that information so that we can have a real and true representative map of what these features are on the ground into this data set, so that it can be used to inform research that's going on for this project, but then also so that we can have this really robust open data set that is available for anybody to use. So this web map that we've created, this is just that first glimpse. I mean, I don't even know if we would want to call it a beta version of this map, because we're going to have so many other iterations going on where we're going to be obtaining data from our partners, from the community, that will continue to enrich this map. But as we're going forward, this will absolutely be something that will be an open data download, where folks can point APIs to this, where people can download it and use it in their own analysis and use it for their own advocacy in their communities as well. So I'm going to pause for a super quick minute because I need to have a sip of my water. And so if folks have any questions, and again, I know that we have a lot of our data providers, so folks whose data is powering this existing data set, if anyone wanted to talk a little bit about their data, that would be fantastic. So
yeah, I definitely want to open it up for Katie and Jamie and anyone else. Natasha's here to maybe reflect on what you're seeing so far. But Dee's relatively simple example is actually has tons of things that we need to think through. So first of all, notice when Cheryl put that address where the point actually went, right? 2500 North Avenue went way to the center of campus, not literally on North Avenue. And so if you're thinking of something that is happening in the median that might be community managed, like the median along literally the street of North Avenue, we'd have to figure out how to represent that on the map. Because right now we're using blocks and lots, and that may not have a block and lot because it's in the public right of way. So that's one kind of technical issue. But then the second thing that you're raising is who's validating, right? Who's going to validate? If we did put a dot here today, what is the process of validation? And in some cases, we're thinking about we eyeball it, like if you see it, or if you claim it. I think what Dee's hesitant to say is that maybe you're not claiming the fact that this is a community managed open space, but if you see something, is that enough validation to add it to the map? And I think that's an excellent kind of philosophical question, maybe for the rest of us on the team. Does that count? And this is a meeting, so you should be able to just unmute yourself and speak up freely. So. I don't know, Kristen, what do you think about validation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would love to hear from the folks here. Just what are your thoughts about this?
I think it's an interesting question. Can you hear me? This is Katie Lauder.
Yep, Katie, we can hear you great.
I think it's a really interesting question because, we don't add anything to our database without a community member connected to it. But in this case, you have a community member who is directly identifying, like, I take care of this space, right? Or, I know we've been involved with this space. I think for us, we don't generally, I think the validation comes into like, what layer are you going to, like, what category does it go in, right? Like, are we thinking about the space as a pocket park, whatever the categories are? I think for us, that would be the question. Do we see those things the same way? But also in our data set, we only keep track of things that are on green spaces that are in danger potentially of being developed. And because it's protected by the school already, it wouldn't get in our data set, but would be useful for yours if it's community engagement. And that's harder to define without a lot record boundary. So I think that you'd have to come up with an interesting way to define the boundary of the space itself on the property that's owned. Like there are a lot of green spaces that exist on school properties all around the city that may or may not be represented in the data set. And then their parcel and their acreage might not represent the acreage of the actual green space because the acreage is related to the lot map. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I don't know if they're helpful.
I think those are good thoughts. I mean, and somebody also raised, Christopher is saying community associations too. And Katie, I know you work with some neighborhood leaders and things like that. I'm wondering, about your sense of them serving as some type of validation as well.
Yeah, I think that's if they're willing to devote the time to it, I think that's a really great way to do it, assuming they're a community association that has a wide breadth of membership across a region.
Mm-hmm.
So in Chris's example for Bolton Hill, which we'd be happy to talk to Bolton Hill anytime, one of the benefits I think now, for example, if you haven't already created your Excel spreadsheet that tracks the ones that you're caring for, if you don't have that kind of a spreadsheet, and not again to put John Seacut on the hook here, but we've been working with CivicWorks because they don't actually have a database that they could upload, even though they are involved in so many properties around the city. So if Bolton Hill doesn't already have a data set that you are maintaining. One thing that this project can help you is we actually created a draft template for what you could be collecting. Again, you won't probably fill in every single thing for every single property, but in that presentation that Cheryl showed, she showed that the 7 kinds of information that we were looking for, and that could be, you know, a useful thing maybe to community organizations that aren't already creating a database, but this gives them a place to start.
Natasha, who is also part of our team, raised a great point about even having the neighbor associations involved in the database, having them look at this, perhaps.
I also think like one step to the validation could be like, if you, as part of the questionnaire, does it say, are you involved in the project? Because I really feel like if someone's involved in the project, like, I don't know that you need validation as to whether it exists, really. But more, again, it's back to the categories. But then if they're not involved in the project and they're just driving by and added it to your database, then that kind of, I think, requires some validation. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Kim Sauer from Council Member Christopher Burnett's office. Another thing that you could tap into is the staff within the city council's office. So for example, every Friday, our entire office goes out to do site visits around our district. And so we are able to we drive by a lot of these green spaces and stuff like that. And so really tapping into those who are doing that canvassing or surveying or site visiting to be able to either validate or even input initially the data that's needed.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're taking you up on that offer.
Now, I don't know if other, like what other districts do, but I know specifically for District 8, Harris Gray and Councilmember Burnett go out every single Friday and drive throughout the district to look for things that can be reported to 311, but in their travels, if provided in advance, a list of spaces that needed confirmation or validation, they could very much assist in our district.
So
Kim, that is amazing.
Yeah, one thing, we're with you next Friday. What are you doing this Friday? One thing that you can show, for example, is that zip code filter. And you can certainly, it's not the council district, but you can certainly put in the zip code and see which sites we currently have for the councilman's district. I think it's 2121229, is that right? Roughly.
Yeah, there are several overlaps, but yeah, that's one of them.
So for example, we only have 5 sites in the 21229 zip code. And if the councilman wants to add to this, we will 100% take it. The validation will be very quick.
Yes, and as I mentioned earlier, so this form to add a lot, so this is something that can be accessed very easily on a mobile device too. So filling out this information, but then this location, so the step number 2. So with that locate me button, so if you're physically out in the world, you can hit that button and it will pull in your latitude, longitude coordinates. So even if you don't necessarily have a really good like descriptive street address, I mean, we'll still take that. But if it's something that is very specifically located, using that locate me option or literally just dragging and dropping a pointer on the map, that will be a great way that we will be able to integrate that location aspect into the data set so that, you know, sometimes, because there was a data set where we had received a bit of location information. And when we pulled up the parcel, it was for the entire parcel of Druid Hill Park. But obviously the greening space, the site wasn't the entirety of the park. It was at a very specific location on the edge. And so having both sets of information, so like what's the mailing address, what's a general description of the location, but then also very specific details about where something is located to, that helps in both, just having a really robust data set and spatial location into the database, but then also helps if somebody else is going out and doing the validation, that they're not wandering around, the entirety of Druid Hill Park, happening to look for a particular site location.
There was a question in the chat that I had this is Brian Murray, BCD Design Group. There was a question in the chat that I think Jennifer Mange brought up. Are the privately held lots that have been historically vacant that community members take care of unofficially, are those potentially on this database, and would they be on this database? And it's similar to the question that I was thinking about, is there are a lot of greened up spaces that are not publicly accessible, that are owned by churches or owned by, that were meant for community use, but are usually typically locked or for the safety of the lot itself and the institution that created it. Are those located on this map, and do we delineate completely publicly open and or semi-private, semi-public?
Great question.
For the Baltimore Green Space data set, we have some limited information on whether the space is fenced or locked. And, that the availability of that is kind of a little bit dependent on how familiar we are with the space when it got put into the record. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's not something that we consistently have for all of these points in here. But that is something that, as folks are adding locations to the map, there might be a way to, specifically designate. So currently in this add a greeting lot, there is this option here for other nodes. I mean, that could potentially for now be a place where we can collect information that something might be fenced off, something might be locked, it might not be accessible fully to the public, but is still being used as a community space in one way or another.
I think you're hearing us say that we prefer to err on the side of more than less. We're not going to exclude, we're not going to try and exclude anything, because if it's something that you want in the database, we might as well keep it there. Now, there may be caveats in the sense that, what if somebody doesn't want their site on the map, that then they actually own the property? That could be something where we would potentially take it off. Like if we did put something here that was on a church and we put it on the map, and they requested to be taken off, and they own the property, we probably would honor that. But mostly we are talking about vacant lots that are not being maintained by whoever the current owner should have been, and how communities are taking their own initiative to take care of the land in their own space. That's really what we're after, this idea of the community managed open space. But there's some gray lines there about, what should be in and what should be out.
Mm-hmm. Cheryl, there's also a question from Bonnie, and she's just wondering about, would it be too much to add a space for adding an image at each site? And we had talked about this at the team. So I don't know if you want to speak to that at all. Anybody?
Cheryl said that this was not quite the beta version. What's before beta? Is that gamma? The gamma version?
So a very early version. Well, so I would say the only reason you're not seeing any images as you're clicking through on these is just because we don't have images necessarily, you know, linked to each of these sites. So that is something that we could absolutely start to integrate when photos are available, but there's always so many questions about, okay, so who's going to be taking the photos? What's going to be the process of adding it to the database? You know, when should photos be taken? Like at what stage of greening or activity. So that's certainly something that I know the partners have been talking about, but in terms of the technology, that is something that can absolutely be included so that as folks are playing around with whatever version we might end up on 6 months from now, 12 months from now, or beyond, that that becomes a part of this database, as well as the visualization tools, the ability to then see additional media attachments that are associated with it.
I was curious about Bolton Hill question, because I feel like we probably have a lot of sites in Bolton Hill right now. And the question is, what sites do we have versus what the community or organization might already have? And how do we reconcile those potential differences? Or maybe that's technically Upton, I guess. Not necessarily. No.
Yeah, but again, just because we don't have a ton of Bolton Hill sites on this map right now doesn't mean that those don't exist. It just means that they don't exist in the 4 data sets that are integrated on here. So this is why it's so important to have those partnerships with organizations that are collecting and maintaining this, or for others to just go ahead and add in sites that are you know, around the corner from them in their backyard. So that's always something that we love, you know, being able to open up data sets to submissions from the neighborhood experts, you know, the folks that are living in these communities that already have a familiarity with what's going on in their neighborhood. So this is just as you know, we keep mentioning and talking about, you know, this is that opportunity to make sure that there is representation of what is going on the ground, gets included into these, you know, these databases, so that as folks are doing research and people are using this data set for advocacy, they have a really clear picture of what the conditions are in these neighborhoods.
Does anybody want to add anything to the map today?
I was going to say, I have here, maybe I can hit refresh and see if we've had any additions to the map. So again, what was in the database already is going to be coming through as a green dot. Any new submissions, excluding mine that was a fake submission in the water, will be coming in as orange. So let's see, it'll take a second to reload here. Oh, it's taking more than a second. Hopefully that means people are submitting things. Okay. And so we obviously don't want to be putting people on the spot. So I know myself as a participant of these hands-on workshops, sometimes it's also fun just to be watching others drive the map and play around with it. So this is a tool that will be open. It's going to be available if you wanted to check this out at some point in the future. We absolutely encourage folks to do so. We have also been recording this session, and this video will be made available. So if at some point you wanted to share this information with a neighbor, with a colleague, with your community association to think through how you can get your neighborhood lots represented on this map, this will be a resource for folks. And so if you find yourself with a little bit of downtime, either later tonight or at some point maybe later this week or on the weekend, we will be having this available so that everyone can take a look at it, make their additions, and just check out all the things that are being included on the map right now.
Hey, Cheryl, I had a question. There's a question in the chat from TJ about lot sizes. And if there's a way to sort by the size of the community green space. I know that like some of the community green spaces are multi-lot. So there's like, you know, Duncan Street Miracle Garden was like was initially like 23 lots or something. Now it's on like 5, but oh no, 6 or something. But so how does this database, like, can you just say a little bit more about how this, like if I pulled up a green space that was one place but made up of several lots, is that possible? Does it show me like all lots that are in that one space?
So it would be in the database. So for example, Duncan Street Miracle Garden would have the same site name, but multiple lots. And so one thing I was just thinking when he said that, Cheryl, is that we probably need to add site name as a filter so that you can just filter by site name and then you'd see all the lots associated with that site name. So that's one thing that we can add.
Yes. Yes. So again, that all of this, it does rely pretty heavily on making sure that all of these fields are filled out so that if you were to do a search based on something like site name, that it would pull in all of the points that are affiliated with that location. And then the other thing I do want to mention is that we have been getting some data on dimensions of lots. And so we have some information that is filled in there, but that's another opportunity where we can really go through this integrated data set and see how people are reporting dimensions. So again, making sure that everyone might be using dimensions in terms of feet. Are people providing the fact that it might be a rectangular space? Is it a squared space? Would we want to, start encouraging folks, if possible, to calculate the area? I don't know if we need to encourage people to be doing a little bit of math in here, but absolutely having something as simple as a consistent site name will at the very least be able to highlight on the map all of the adjacent parcels that are representative of one particular lot. You might have different plots within a garden, for instance, but that will be an easier way for you to be able to see and to visualize that as well.
Cheryl, did you show them how like some of it, when you zoom in, you can get the multiple, the fact that let's kinds have multiple.
Yeah, let's take another quick look at that. So I think I might have mentioned it really quickly in passing. So again, we have, so this map will update as you or me, whoever is panning around, zooming in, zooming out. So as we're doing that, it will update this total records on the map. So again, this is the number of rows in the data set, but then we will have something like the unique parcels. So from here, just in this one particular view, immediately south of the Greenmount East Cemetery, we have a lot of instances here where we can see that there's a lot of locations that are adjacent to one another. So perhaps these are the same sites, but then with these little numbers here, these will indicate the number of stacked dots on the map. So sorry, I was panning around a little bit. So for like this spot right here, we've got 4 that are coming through. So these are 4 records that came across in different or the same data set. So on this particular one, I just clicked on it really quickly. So this is 1316 Valley Street. So we're able to scroll through here. This came from Baltimore Housing. We have a little bit of information. So this was something that came through spring of 2020 through spring of this year, 2021. I've got a little bit of information on here. Oh, so it's through Rebuild Johnson Square Neighborhood Organization. And as we pan through, we're able to then take a look. So, okay, so here's something that was 2019 through 2020. So this is data that's coming. Now here's some, so we have slightly different information that's coming through here. So here we can see for sure that this is a Care-a-Lot site, and then we have some information. So across years within one data set and then across different data sets. So yeah, in 2016, so that's when this one's coming through. So we do have a lot of these duplications of locations. So that's something that we've been trying to figure out, well, how do we want to deal with this? Do we want to have, in this case, so in the zoomed in view, we have 74 unique parcels, but we have 338 records. Do we want to eventually just have 74? Do we want to keep the 338? So these are questions that we're trying to figure out of what's the best way of structuring this database so that we can see change across time, so that we're able to see information about these sites 1 year to another. But then also, how do we integrate information from these different sources to be able to tell that one big comprehensive story about these sites and these locations?
In the search feature right now, can you search by site name? So for example, TJ, was it you? Sorry, Brennan also said that the ones in his neighborhood were already here. TJ suggested to look up the Baltimore Free Farm or Heart and Soil. We can't search by site name right now as it stands, right? We'd have to add that.
Correct. Yeah, so that's something that we would be able to add in on this left-hand side to filter by an attribute. So an attribute, that's something, a descriptive field that we have in the data set. So in this case, attribute that we would want to filter by is site name. So right now we have this little option here on the map. This will just allow you to search for a location, like a specific street address on the map. And so if you had, that's just the way that it's set up right now, but we certainly have the flexibility.
So we got an address now, 3511 Ash Street.
Okay, 3511 Street. Okay. So let's go there. So this is our search result. So yeah, we've got a couple of locations here. And so let me zoom in even more. So it looks like we've got 5 different parcels in this map view. We've got 14 records. And so yeah, right here we've got, here I'm actually gonna expand these filtered results so we can see this a little bit bigger. I know it might be a little tough for folks to see, but yeah, we've got the Ash Street Community Garden. So we've got this record here from the Baltimore Green Space. So this is 2010 data.
2010.
Mm-hmm. So this is a different part, I believe a different parcel next door to it. Yep, so here, so this is that block and lot, so that unique identifier that we're able to see. So yeah, we've got a couple of these parcels next to one another. We have data going all the way back to 2010. So this is data that is coming from Baltimore Housing. And so, yeah, 14 records in here. But so as we can see, even though we were kind of really zoomed into that one location, we don't consistently have site name across all of these records. We just have that in the Baltimore Green Space data set, even though we're looking at these adjacent addresses and adjacent block and lots.
Kim, you wanted to know if we were using anything from CodeMap, and what'd you have in mind there?
So I just wasn't sure how, because I know CodeMap has a lot, especially for like the city-owned lots. I know they have a ton of data, and I wasn't sure if you guys were working with them to like share data, transfer data, things like that.
We're working with the Baltimore Housing, I mean, our HCD. I'm not sure if we can talk about the relationship between that and CodeMap. Any, Megan or Natasha? So I think what these are vacant lots where we have more information about them, right? Vacant lots that have been adopted as a care lot or adopted as an adopt a lot. So they're a kind of a subset of, you know, the broader code map data.
Got it.
And so one thing that I do want to quickly mention, so because this current dashboard and map is built off of Esri and their ArcGIS online platform, we can very, very easily pull in other data sets, so grab APIs. And so we've done that right now with just a few of our own reference layers that we've been able to integrate into this map. We can start thinking through these different indicators that provide that community context. And so as we are continuing to develop this tool, we will certainly be pulling in any available data sets that we can just grab from the city, like from their Open Baltimore platform. So I know they have been putting out a lot of open data releases around locations of vacant buildings, obviously, but I know they have been also maintaining on Open Baltimore at some point vacant lots. So that's something that we would just need to be able to plug onto the map. But I'm sure it would be a great conversation to have of ways that we can start relating potentially these different data sets and get them talking to one another, either in the database itself or on a visualization too.
So Circe, thank you for your question. It's probably like the most philosophical question that we're going to get tonight is what's the plan for all these lots? Like, why do we have so many big lots and what are we planning on doing with them? And I'll just start because I know so many other people are going to answer this question. But in general, the vacant lots are here because obviously we have had a decline in population for the last 70 years. And so as population has declined, the infrastructure that was there for the once, 950,000 people that we used to have, 950,000 people that we used to have, they have gone essentially fallow because there's no development activity there. And so communities are essentially trying to take over these lots that were once occupied by people that are no longer there, which is a very challenging psychological, thing for communities to face. And so on the one hand, taking over these lots is an act of empowerment, but you're right. For some communities, they don't want them to be vacant lots forever. But I know Katie specifically is working with communities that do want the lots to be greened into the long term. So it's a challenging question to have one answer to, but it's I guess at the heart of why these even exist, right? Maybe you should talk about the Baltimore Green Spaces kind of mission. Melvin or Katie.
Yeah. So Baltimore Green Spaces mission is to preserve community gardens and pocket parks and to teach people and to advocate for any of the policies that help neighborhood leaders who are already doing that continue to do that well. And we also work with folks caring for community forests because there are also a lot of community forests in Baltimore. But we are a land trust that enables community leaders to put the green space in the trust if it has been cared for 5 years or more and has enough people continuing to take care of it. So there's a process for preservation and a policy that we developed with Baltimore City government in order to enable that to happen a little bit more easily. And so that's what we do. There are, as you can see, a lot of neighbors put a lot of investment and love and care into caring for green spaces. And we exist to make it possible for them to retain those spaces into the long term after dedicating so much time and energy to them. And I would also note that a lot of the way the green spaces exist in Baltimore aligns with very clearly with the way that Baltimore was historically redlined. So, and that's even more apparent in your maps now that you have more green spaces apparent in our maps, but you have like, all this other data from that we're looking forward to like enriching our system with. Does that answer your question?
I mean, I don't think there's one. So I was going to put in a link. There's no one answer, right? these are contested spaces. I don't know if anybody's been following, and maybe we should check to see if the Black Yield Institute farm in Cherry Hill is on the map. I don't know. But you know, that community is now, let's say, in a heated conversation with the HAVC to maintain their farm that they have, which is technically on HAVC land. And the HAVC has plans for developing it. So we need to make sure that that one is on the map. Code map, I think, does have, I'll put a link to code map. I think it does show where the city wants to develop properties, even though there are vacant properties there. You can see where they have what's called the target investment areas, where they're really actively trying to redevelop properties and not keep them demolished or vacant. A good example of that is the Oliver Johnston Square area, where they have mapped out where they want to do redevelopment, where they want to keep green spaces with the community. And it's on that map of where they want to do what. So code map might be a place for thinking about what's that long-term plan. But thank you for the question, because it is, and I think it's not only one answer, but it's never one answer over time. And maybe Katie, you've got some experience with that. You know, maybe right now, in the face of, you know, looking at terrible green spaces in your neighborhood, the best thing to do is green them. But that might not be what you want forever. You know, 5-10 years from now, maybe you do want to actually put some housing on that land. So, or vice versa, maybe you do want to keep it green forever. So I think it's never one thing forever.
Yeah, it's not. It evolves with the community, with community need. And we've actually had at times, you know, neighbors say that they were just kind of caring for a space to make sure it wasn't being used for purposes that they didn't want it to be used for. But in the long term, if someone were to purchase it and develop on it, that they would prefer that. That's definitely the rarer case in the folks that we connect with. We more often deal with people, I work with leaders who want to keep their space forever and want to figure out ways to make sure it's sustainable for future generations.
Kristen, Cheryl, any final thoughts, or anybody else?
I mean, the biggest thing is, if you know anyone with greening data, we'll take it. So I think that's our big general message. And hopefully, again, we want this to be usable, shareable for all of us that are invested in Baltimore City. And so that's what that's my plug that I'll just keep repeating, I guess. We need green data.
Well, we've got a few submissions to the map. So
Yay!
I see some
Okay.
coming in Irvington. So wonderful. Thank you. And so, yes, as we've been hearing a lot of great feedback and recommendations. So if anybody has any thoughts, any feedback on different ways that this tool can be usable and actionable, particularly for communities, that's something that, you know, we're always all ears for. And in addition to just having additional lots added to this map. So again, just making sure that this is a really comprehensive look at the different lots that are being greened in Baltimore. So, and I would also just like to really quickly thank everybody for joining us. So sometimes this can be a little bit of a tricky time slot, but I really appreciate everyone for joining us today. And hopefully we'll have a few more additions to this map. So thank you.
And yeah, echoing Katie's message, Cheryl created this map. It's a wonderful job, and we've got good feedback today to make it the Gamma 0.1 version or whatever we're calling it. Please do fill out this survey today. This was, what was it? This was event number 5 for Baltimore Data Week, day number 2. And so we've got 3 more days. We are headed into housing tomorrow, mostly housing, and some really cool workshops tomorrow if you want to join us. And also on Thursday and Friday, we have some hybrid options in case you want to actually see each other in person. And then finally, we do have a happy hour on Friday, so feel free to join us for that too. So thanks so much, everybody. Great to see you here, and thanks for the feedback, and great job to the whole Project Vital team and getting us to this launch today.
Thank you all so much. And Cheryl and Seema and all the BINIA team, just kudos to all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Really beautiful.